Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the Art Show, University of Dayton celebrates 10 years of empowering creative confidence.
Art Street currently is sort of an original multidisciplinary creative and imagination center.
We get up close to evocative paintings steeped in history.
Beckmann, for me, is the greatest German painter of the 20th century.
Learn the shocking truth behind some frightening old photographs.
Well, we're looking at a very scary American horror story.
And meet a surfer turned skilled master craftsman.
The biggest challenges I think I face making the skateboards is to continue coming up with new designs.
It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and this is The Art Show, where each week we get unprecedented access to local, regional, and national artists and arts organizations. Universities have rec centers to exercise your body and libraries to exercise your mind. But what about exercising your creativity? Art Street at the University of Dayton is designed to provide students of both traditional studies and art studies access to a creative space.
Art Street is a place for students of all majors and types and personalities to come to create anything they want.
You can actually come in any major, any background, and like maybe there's an artist and an engineer working together and they solve some pretty big problems that way. That's what happens here at UD. It's pretty cool.
So Art Street was originally designed to be a art center in the middle of the student neighborhood.
There's recording studios. There are practice spaces for instruments. There's a creator space that we're currently sitting in where there's art supplies of all kinds provided to them. Paints, canvases, there's an entire wall and floor covered with dry erase board paint so people can noodle around on ideas.
Art Street, it was developed 10 years ago. The title art had become a title of its own where people who didn't necessarily play a guitar, paint, act, sing, felt they weren't part of it here. And so in the last 2 years, Art Street has redeveloped itself into becoming more of what we would kind of call a multidisciplinary creative and imagination center. And partly to that because you're starting to see a design and a remake of the student body.
It's basically here to be creative, to think through things together as a community rather than just individuals. So I think that's a pretty neat area that we can work into.
60 students live here. They are asking for more creative ways to approach the work they do. They apply to live here because they feel the need for the application of creativity in the work they do. And that makes them a more marketable, more a student in the workplace when they get hired. So part of what we do here now is start to develop a new way of learning through application of creativity, the idea that imagination begets creativity, which begets innovation. So the hope is that Art Street is a wholly interactive experience for everybody, and I think that is something that we're still working on to get the word out, but it's strong.
It kind of upsets me how some people just kind of brush it under the rug and think it's just like a separate second subtopic to education, but I think that really being artistic and creative makes you an individual, and just using art and creativity in your everyday life can make you whoever you want to be.
I actually think art and creativity, the models between those two, how they influence each other in education, allow people to think and see the box, what's outside that box, and how outside and inside that box can work together. The dynamic in the workplace right now, especially those larger companies that are pushing the envelopes, the Amazons, the Apples, the Googles, they are looking for a new generation of holistic, creative thinkers. They don't just want the engineer. They want the engineer who identifies with creative inspiration. The Dayton community has become our #1 demographic in a sense. And it was by accident, and it's been awesome. What we're starting to see is that we get the population in Dayton to come, walk around the White Box Gallery and kind of go, I never saw it this way. Or I'm excited to come here because they've got a new idea here. The heartbeat of the gallery really is built on these 6 exhibitions a year, and these exhibitions are world premiere works.
Hypermediacy basically is a art installation that we're doing.
The title of the show actually references its main point, which is the constant influx of information that we have at our fingertips now with smartphones and tablets. Cable news is on 24 hours a day. And all of this information comes to us all the time. And how do we process that? And what is good information? What do we need to know? What is important? And how do those subjects stay relevant, or do they in fact stay relevant?
We've got the 504 children. Hypermediacy was that opportunity for us to sort of create a world where select artists can come into a room for 3 days straight, 8 to midnight, and get inundated with the news of now. They also can be responded to by students, by faculty, by the community through Twitter, through Facebook, through Snapchat, through Instagram, whatever medium you use. The artists are supposed to create a scope of what is happening in our world for roughly 3.5 days. And then we definitely go into more of a traditional narrative gallery exhibition with the work they create to see what is actual news, because we're constantly reacting to news so fast.
We take viral immediacy at a moment's notice and really begin to engage that, and then begin to respond to that almost immediately in 140 characters or less via Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. So it's really a matter of how do we take that learnable application and then apply that to the academic sphere that is a higher education background.
In order for us to produce topical, current event-based artwork, the only option is to create art on the spot right before you show it to a public. And keeping up with that pace of news from a producer's standpoint has been very hard. I've had to quicken my pace a lot. The first day I only produced 2 pieces and realized that wasn't going to cut it. I think I'm up to 8 pieces in 2 days. That pace has been really, really tricky.
We don't just bring in work and hang shows here. These are works that are inspired and developed by thematic causes, missions. We call it radical creative arts experiences. The White Box Gallery kind of leads the charge for all of our workshops, which we call intersections, all of our exchanges. These exchanges we have are kind of creative cultural salon debates, as well as the curriculum. And I think that is a natural struggle for us to try to figure out how can we continue to find value and intentionality in this new kind of application to the overall curriculum of the students, so that we're not stepping on professors' toes. I think that is the biggest struggle right now, is trying to find acceptance and respect for the idea that imagination and creativity can be the next phase at higher education.
If you haven't been to an exhibit in the White Box Gallery, you're missing a great chance to see world premiere multimedia installations. For a full schedule of events, visit thinktv.org/theartshow and click the Art Street link. In Missouri, at the St. Louis Art Museum, you'll find the Max Beckmann exhibition. Having amassed the largest collection of the German painter's work, the exhibit is unique for its range and size. But it's the rich colors and evocative subject matter that continue to captivate visitors more than a century after Beckmann's death.
It's the largest collection of paintings by Max Beckmann in the world. We have 39 paintings here. We have around 350 prints. Beckmann was a great printmaker. So, you know, this really, if anywhere in the world to see Max Beckmann, this is the place. The main reason for that is a collector called Morton May, who is the largest private collector of Beckmann's work. When Beckmann came to St. Louis in the late 1940s, he met Morton May. He painted Morton May's portrait, and he bequeathed his collection to the St. Louis Art Museum in 1983. First major retrospective of Beckmann's work in America took place here in 1948. Beckmann, for me, is the greatest German painter of the 20th century. He's an artist who, throughout his career, was always searching for new modes of painting, of printmaking, of sculpture. He experimented in all of those areas. And the sinking of the Titanic here is really one of his most ambitious paintings, certainly in terms of scale. This is a work which measures 8.5 feet high by 11 feet wide. What you can see here is essentially the struggle for survival of these figures who are in the various lifeboats. The Titanic you can see in the distance against this kind of iron red sky. And then kind of beyond that, just the wonderful colors that the Beckman creates in the water in particular, the yellows, the reds, the golds here. And then the figures who, as you start to look more closely at the painting, start to emerge. So for example here, you can see a figure of a drowning man whose head, kind of rather ghostly head, just appears out of the water. The painting has a kind of power to it which I think is in many ways largely due to Beckman's composition. He chose to actually set his horizon very high up, almost right at the top of the painting. And because of that, one has almost a sensation that the boats are tumbling out of the composition. It really adds to the kind of disorienting, kind of nightmarish quality that I think he was aiming for in this composition. His work, particularly in the 1920s, is a kind of social commentary. It deals with the atmosphere in Germany, particularly after World War I, the sense of depression, of desolation during that period. Max Beckmann's Christ and the Woman Taken in Adultery was painted in 1917. It's a painting which really speaks to human cruelty, human barbarism, the kind of subjects that Beckman had experienced in World War I and which have deeply affected him. So what you see in this painting here is that a woman is being stoned by a mob, and then in the center of the composition you have the figure of Christ who's protecting the woman. Interestingly, the face of Christ is actually modeled on that of Beckman himself. One of the interesting things in Beckman's work is to try to spot Beckman in his other paintings, because he's often kind of hiding himself within more religious or mythological scenes. He'll represent himself as a king or as Christ indeed. So he's a man a little bit like Picasso, who had this very strong ego, but in a way that is what makes him a great artist. It's what separates him from other figures. And it's interesting to see that there have been a lot of exhibitions recently of Beckman's work, and people are, which would never have been the case 10 years ago, that people are starting to talk about Beckman in the same kind of breath as a Picasso or a Matisse. He was extremely popular in the 1920s. He had a very secure patron base. What you see in the 1930s as the Nazis come to power is that starts to disappear. His work is declared degenerate. He's declared a cultural Bolshevik. And by 1937, Beckman is leaving Germany. He's going into exile. His work is in the Degenerate Art Exhibition in Germany in 1937. But he spends the years from 1937 to 47 in Amsterdam. So this is Acrobats. This is the third of Beckman's 9 completed triptychs, painted in 1939. Beckman was always fascinated by the circus, and what you see here are a group of circus performers. You've got 3 different areas within the circus. To the left here is the circus arena. So you can see figures on a tightrope here. You can see a trapeze artist at the top. In the center, you have a kind of behind-the-scenes view. This is a dressing room with a number of performers who are getting ready to perform. For example, you have a snake charmer here on the right. And then in the right-hand triptych, you have the entrance foyer to the circus. You can see the ice cream cellar on the left. These are a couple of clowns here who are drinking champagne. And then the figure at the top right is a performer dressed as Mars, the Roman god of war. And this, for Beckman was a reference to the wider historical context, the fact that this painting was painted around the onset of World War II. I like to imagine that Beckman loved the circus, and he saw it as a kind of sanctuary, a place of retreat, of liberation, And that idea was particularly resonant at this moment when he was surrounded by horror, with the onset of World War II, but he still found a kind of sense of sanctuary in the circus. Beckman, for me, is a great colorist, and that color becomes more and more evident in his late work. So you see these paintings which, where the figures are framed by these wonderful dark black lines, almost like stained glass, and within those lines you have these incandescent colors, canary yellows, wonderful turquoises, bright scarlet reds, and that is part of the appeal of Beckman, just on a purely visceral level. And this painting has a particularly poignant aspect to it for me. It was shown at the Metropolitan Museum in New York in 1950. Beckman was in New York at that time, went to see the painting. It was while he was actually crossing Central Park that he had a heart attack and died. You can trace a kind of dark vision and a fairly pessimistic view of the world in a lot of these works. Having said that, even though he never subscribed to a particular religion, there is a kind of what you might call a sort of spiritual underpinning to his work. He talked about trying to render the invisible visible in his paintings. So, that interest in the spiritual, I think, lends a slightly more optimistic element to his work, which does counterbalance the pessimism that you can see in his view of society. As we've reconceptualized, rethought the collection and reinstalled it in what we've called the new view, we decided to make Max Beckman really front and center. So we wanted to celebrate that and foreground it in a way which we haven't done before.
Are you an artist or know an artist with an interesting story? Pitch it to us. Send an email to theartshow@thinktv.org. Include contact information and links to performances or art samples online.
I'm Sandy Bashaw, and I'm a songwriter. A lot of times people ask me, where does the song come from, or where does the inspiration come from? And I tell them, when you sit down to write a new song, don't look in the place where the last song came from, because it's probably not going to be there.
Let's take a look back at some haunting photographs by 19th century photographer Albert Ewing. To modern viewers, the spooky cloaked figures hiding in the background of these images are the makings of a nightmare. But today, we uncover the mystery and learn just how instrumental a role they played in early photography.
Albert Ewing was born in 1870. He was born in Lowell, Ohio, which is in the southeastern part of the state. He became a photographer in 1896 and photographed until 1912. Hidden mothers. Well, how would you, at that time, when you had to sit still for at least 15 seconds, record an image of a child? And if you moved, it would be blurry, or you would just get a streak. So what Ewing did was what any clever photographer would do, is cover the caretaker, the mother, the father, whoever it was, with a blanket, and then put the baby or the child right on their lap. And then in the darkroom, he could actually sort of crop out that blanketed figure in the back, and you would look like you just had the baby there, and people would wonder how the baby just laid still. Well, we're looking at a very scary American horror story of a blanketed figure and 3 children. Really, though, it is mom under a blanket who's probably keeping her children calm, and you notice it's a dark material. So probably what he's going to do in the dark room, or what he did do, is make the entire background black. So all you would see is the kids. And then, of course, you crop out the legs. So if you go from, say, the shins up, you could actually see how you could create a nice little photograph of the 3 kids in that particular image without mom there. I think it's Ewing's blanket, and you can kind of see her hands holding the baby there. To me, what's interesting is if you think about what he had to go through in the darkroom to kind of get rid of the hands near the baby or turn that plaid blanket into something that was black. That would have been the art of developing. And even in this one, they probably had to redo it because the baby was not very happy. So what they did here is they covered the chair with the blanket, and it looks like Mom, or whoever, could be older sister, could be grandmother, is kneeling in the back, and you can see her bonnet. The way that they're able to keep her calm is by actually sticking her hands through the blankets and then just holding her there. But he probably, when he made the print, he probably cropped out the feet, because the feet kind of look funny. They have a foreshortening there that doesn't really work. And he probably just kept the bib around the top and then cropped out the top and then came in, and it probably looked like a studio shot. In the 1890s or the early 1900s was the first time that regular folks would be able to pay a quarter, a dime, or whatever it was to get a picture of each of their children. So in the early days, you see more family portraits. You don't really see pictures of individuals in the family. This was the first time where people could afford it.
If you like seeing historical photographs, and especially historical photographs of Dayton, look for the link to Dayton history books online at thinktv.org/theartshow. Meet a Florida couple who turned to skateboarding when the Gulf waves proved too calm for surfing. And it wasn't just about the thrill for this daring duo. The two began crafting skateboards with such artistry that it wasn't long before their friends wanted boards of their own.
My name is Nick Lambesi. I'm a craftsman, and making skateboards is my art.
Longline Skateboards is a company that my husband and I started, and it just grew out of our passion for surfing, and which evolved into our passion for skating.
Growing up in Florida, we've always been around the water. We'd go out surfing, and I'll hang out in big groups and just be out there all together, and sometimes you can't go out surfing, so we started looking into these longer skateboards, and it gives you that surf ride, so took it to the street, surfed the sidewalk. I think I made my first skateboard when I was, I think around 9 or 10 years old. It took us probably 10 years of doing it to make that perfect combination of wood where not only was it flexible and strong in the same token, but also light.
No two of our skateboards are alike. Each one kind of has its own personality, and it's just, there's something about you having a product or a thing that no one else has. There's definitely a cool feeling about that.
We press the wood together ourselves. It's a rough cutout, and all the boards are done in-house by hand. So all the sanding and everything is done by hand. And then staining or painting or anything like that. And we put them together and safely store them so they don't get all dusty in our very small shop, and away they go.
Nick's definitely a craftsman, and he definitely has an artistic eye. You can't not have an artistic eye and make a skateboard that gorgeous and that symmetrical, and with all the details that he does.
I never really considered it an art, but I guess building the skateboards is a kind of an art. You're coming up with all the schemes and the painting. To me, they look like old surfboards. So you're building something out of wood. You're shaping it, you're sanding it. Comes natural.
I think they're definitely pieces of art. A lot of people, some people actually buy them to just hang on the wall. Some people, they always tell us when they get the skateboards that they're almost too afraid to ride it because it's so nice. They don't want to scratch it. It's kind of like your first drive in your brand new car. It's like, scratch is going to happen, but you're going to cry a little bit when it does.
Every skateboard, I would have to say, is on a personal level, because every single one, there's not one square inch of the board that I haven't touched 50 times. You know what I mean? You're always trying to get every little mark right, all the lines straight. Yeah, it's definitely something I take very personal.
He's so passionate about the process and everything that he does. And if it's not perfect, he's not done, you know. So it's just a great way to just for him to thrive in that passion.
One of the biggest challenges I think I face making the skateboards is to continue coming up with new designs. You can't make the same old thing. So to always have a different shape and a different design and something that doesn't look repetitious, that's my biggest challenge.
We've always been skating. You know, if there wasn't surf, then we would go skating.
Sometimes you get going real fast down steep bridges or something like that. It can be quite the adrenaline rush, like, you know, wipe in a second, but you make it, and then when you make it and everybody's watching, and you're a star for a second, you know.
It's always just kind of been involved in our lives, and it just gives you so much freedom.
My inspiration for making the skateboards right now is just the fact that so many people are still into it. I thought it was always something that would fade, and it seems to grow more than anything.
The joy that I get to see on his face when he gives someone their skateboard and they start riding it, or he's out with his friends cruising around on boards and just watching him watch them on a board he made it's just so awesome for me. It's like awe-inspiring kind of feeling.
See, the thing that makes me the happiest is you're creating out of a couple of pieces of wood this skateboard that somebody's going to take and use and go ride to see their friends, and they're going to look at it and compare who's is faster, you know, who can do more tricks, and just the same thing that it brought to me when I was younger. Making them and getting them out there and selling them to other young kids, and it's you know, the next generation coming up, to see that all come to life again, that's an awesome feeling. And that's why I keep doing it.
Check out their gallery of boards at thinktv.org/theartshow. Click on the Longline Skateboard link. And that wraps it up for this edition of The Art Show. The art season is in full swing. Take a chance and go see some fantastic art. And until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thanks for watching.
Funding for the Art Show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, Ohio Arts Council, Ohio Humanities Council, and viewers like you. Thank you.